Hey guys, so today I am looking at a video from HistoryMarche titled Battle for the East, How Did Heraclius Restore the Byzantine Empire? And again, I have a really great opinion about Emperor Heraclius. I really love the guy, and I don't think he deserves to be talked badly about. But I went through all that discourse in my map video about the Byzantine Empire, so I won't repeat myself. Um, but you should know if you saw that video where I stand. But overall, yeah, while we did cover the last part of his reign when he was old and sick, and the Muslims rose up and Islam spread and took Syria and Egypt from the Romans. So, but I'm happy that we're gonna now be covering Heraclius when he was basically at his peak and when he was wilding against the Sassanids, who, were wreaking havoc and on the verge of actually delivering the death blow to Rome. So we only cover like this in like the Dovahadi series from and again, that was more joking, and Dovahadi is not meant to be taken seriously in that regard, like more of a comedy parody thing. But so I'm really looking forward to getting a more straight-laced historical view on Heraclius's epic comeback, because this is one of Rome's greatest comebacks, one of the greatest comebacks in history, dare I say, because just again, the Sassanids were on the verge, like Rome was in a really bad position, but Heraclius just he locked in, as the kids say. He pulled out one of the best comebacks I've ever seen and heard about, so I'm really looking forward to hopefully seeing that now brought to my screen by the great HistoryMarche, and just really seeing just how this man turned the tide, at the turn of the tide. So I'm really excited to get into this. I will not tolerate Heraclius slander on this channel. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. So we should probably get into it, but first, if you want to watch the original video by HistoryMarche, the link is down in the description down below. And if you enjoy my channel and you want to help me out in my noble goal to reach 1,000 subscribers, if you want to help me on this quest, feel free to please like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help me out a lot, and I would really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Now, with that said, and now with any further ado, let's get to it, shall we? Let us watch from the great HistoryMarche, the battle for the East. How did Heraclius restore the Byzantine Empire? I'm pumped.
To some, it's considered the First Crusade. To others, the last great war of antiquity. In 622, after 20 years of war, the Byzantine Empire was on the brink of destruction, having lost region after region to the Sasanian Persian Empire and its king, Khosrow II. But over the next 6 years and 4 campaigns, the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius would not only completely reverse these territorial losses, but also trigger the downfall of the Persian king himself. The final Byzantine-Persian War took place in an increasingly unstable world. In Constantinople, the cash-strapped Byzantines struggled to meet the demands of mutinous soldiers. In Ctesiphon, the Persian kings had to fend off a series of noble revolts. On top of this, migrating peoples were pressing down from the northern steppes. The Avars and Slavs into the Byzantine Balkans, the Turks along the Persian shores of the Caspian Sea. In 590 AD, a noble revolt in Persia forced King Khosrow II to flee to the Byzantines. There, he got the support of Emperor Maurice, who managed to restore Khosrow to the throne. But Maurice's price was steep. Persia had to cede the highlands of historical Armenia to the Byzantines, leaving the Sasanian heartlands of Mesopotamia and western Iran vulnerable to a future invasion. So when Maurice himself was killed by a military mutiny in 602, Khosrow swiftly took advantage to declare war under the pretext of avenging his benefactor.
Oh,
With
smart.
the Byzantine military in political disarray, Persia began to reclaim not just Armenia, but also the Byzantine forts, shielding Syria from invasion. In 610, Heraclius became Byzantine emperor after another revolt, and the resulting chaos opened the floodgates. One by one, the rich cities of Syria and Egypt fell to Persian armies. Antioch in 610, Jerusalem in 614, Alexandria in 619. The Byzantines in the east were reduced to two regions, Anatolia and the Balkans, and even these were being devastated by Persian and Avar Slav invasions, respectively. Were the Byzantines about to meet the fate of the Western Roman Empire?
Yeah, you would think so, huh? Look at how awful this situation is. Basically just jumped on all sides, completely against the odds, and you inherit this situation, and you have to fix it. Yo, if I didn't know how this all ends, I mean, yeah, it still does end pretty bad, but, with the rise of Islam, but, point is, you would think, this would be the end, but usually, as with most Roman events that are bad, where they probably should have died, a random genius will show up and turn the tide. That's a lot of parts of Roman history. It's like, dang, the Romans, there's no way they're gonna get out of this situation, and then some random military genius will show up out of nowhere and fix everything. That's literally how the crisis of the 3rd century, well, that's a bit simplified. There were actually very competent people before Aurelian, it was kind of like, the point is, you get what I mean, right? Or with Hannibal and stuff, like Scipio, just at times, just a random genius will rise up and fix Rome's problems. It's a really interesting trend with Rome. Doop.
Despite the dire situation, the Byzantines still had a few glimmers of hope. The first lay in the Byzantine army, even in its sharply reduced and demoralized state. By this time, both Byzantines and Persians fielded similar armies, being built around a core of professional composite cavalry, skilled in both horse archery and melee combat. Equipment and tactics largely followed steppe nomad practice, from the powerful composite bow to the emphasis on feigned retreats and long-distance pursuits.
Really?
Still, the Byzantines saw their army as slightly better equipped and better drilled than their Persian counterparts, which gave them the confidence to risk open battle, while the Persians resorted to smaller-scale ambushes instead. But this advantage didn't mean a lot, given the sheer disparity in resources between the Byzantines and the Persians. The recent conquests might have taken away a third of Byzantine revenue, while adding 50% to Persia's. The good news was that whatever the Byzantines had left was mostly shielded behind the double walls of Constantinople or the wooden wall of its Mediterranean fleets. Heraclius's government squeezed as much as it could out of this shrunken base, raising taxes and cutting expenses, confiscating local revenue and church treasure, not to mention debasing the currency. Any one of these policies could generate significant unrest, so to justify these actions, Heraclius worked closely with the church, recasting the Persian War as a defense of Christianity against the pagans, where present suffering would be compensated for by spiritual rewards.
Yeah, about his earlier comment in regards to this kind of being sometimes referred to as the First Crusade, I've often heard, some people dub Heraclius the First Crusader, so, definitely I could see that perspective, and, it's a really interesting one, for sure, and it's just really cool.
This partnership must have been effective, for despite Heraclius's usurping and disastrous reign so far, he suffered few instances of revolt, and especially military mutiny.
Wow.
By the year 622, both the Byzantines and the Persians were in a position to consider their new steps in what was now a 2-decade-long war. In particular, it's not entirely
This became a 2-decade-long conflict, longest war in the series, and was fought throughout the Middle East in Egypt, the Levant, Mesopotamia, the Caucasus, Anatolia, Armenia, and the Aegean Sea before the walls of Constantinople. Just all out, bro. This is like the two great powers just going at it.
clear why Persia was still in the war. Khosrow certainly intended to keep his spectacular gains in Syria and Egypt, where his government was already rebuilding the local administration and extending religious tolerance to local Christians. But it doesn't seem like he had similar plans to annex Anatolia, which remained a seesawing battleground where Persia mainly sought to capture and deport local resources. Khosrow also seems to not have built a large Mediterranean fleet, which would have been necessary to capture Constantinople and establish a secure hold over Anatolia. It's possible that Khosrow wanted to preserve a weak Byzantine remnant as a vassal, but couldn't tolerate or even negotiate with Heraclius, a person whom Persian propaganda characterized as a bandit. It's also possible that plans for further conquests were being opposed by the nobles of Persia, who resented the financial and manpower contributions they had to make, and feared that a stronger Khosrow might start exacting revenge on them. Whatever the reason, Persia was now in the dangerous position of having a directionless war policy, just as the Byzantines were stabilizing themselves. On the other side, the Byzantines were forced by circumstance to have a clearer goal in mind: simply end the war. This was easier said than done, since, as mentioned, Khosrow refused to talk to Heraclius. The old Roman Empire had a way to force peace under these circumstances, namely by launching invasions deep into Persian Mesopotamia and threatening its capital of Ctesiphon. Their preferred route down the Euphrates was by now too well fortified for this, not to mention that all the Byzantine forts and staging areas were currently in Persian hands. Instead, Heraclius chose historical Armenia and Transcaucasia as his route to threaten the Persian heartlands. This was a far less direct method, and the highlands and river valleys could easily trap an attacking army, especially when winter snows blocked the mountain passes. But at least the man-made fortifications could be bypassed, and the local pasture land would relieve some of the Byzantine cavalry's logistical burden. Furthermore, Heraclius's family had military experience to the region, if not blood ties, granting him a potential intelligence and political edge over his Persian counterparts. And lastly, directly across the Caucasus to the north lay the nomadic confederation of the Turks, long-standing enemies of the Persians, whose military help Heraclius was already looking to enlist. A few adjustments had to be made before the campaigns could begin. First, in order to reliably outmaneuver the Persian cavalry, the Byzantine army had to be made even faster, and that meant dropping much of the baggage train and accepting the possibility that they wouldn't be able to communicate with Constantinople for months on end. Secondly, given the stakes, Heraclius would have to lead the army himself. Secondly, given the
Okay, so there are many things I find so interesting. I didn't I don't think I commented on it earlier, but like the way that they fight, like the thought of Romans being like horse archers and stuff is just really cool. Just seeing how the Romans evolved, the evolution of the Roman military from like antiquity all the way to the late Byzantine era is just some of the coolest development I've ever seen. you know, to go, just the many different ways. Because I was thinking, like, when is, like, the Roman military at its peak? Is, like, I guess the answer is whenever the Byzantines were at theirs, because, yeah, but just one really just cool evolution from the early Romans to, like, now. I've been really fascinated in just the evolution, you know, of the Roman military and how they kind of evolved and, you know, adopted a lot of, like, battle styles and weaponry from people around them, their enemies, just always on a constant evolution, you get me? That's really cool. And yeah, like the situation with Khosrow, like he not being able to just assimilate everything due to the issues. I get it. Like I as a new Total War Rome 2 player, it do be like that sometimes, you know? Sometimes it's like, yeah, the bigger you make your empire or something, the more unstable it can be. Like, I was playing as Macedon for, like, the third time in the Grand Campaign, and, I was like, my goal was to recreate Alexander's empire again. Like, I was like, okay, in this run, let me try to, you know, be Alexander the Great, and so I was heading eastward, you know, conquering Anatolia, which took forever, and further eastward. But there comes a point where it's just, I kept having, like, successions, especially in the Far East, like around India, like the Indian families were acting up so much, and just constantly every 10 turns not being safe from civil war successions. Like, maybe it's just because I'm bad at the politics, though I keep trying. I keep, like, promoting people, paying the families for their loyalty, but just there just came a point where things were just so unstable. I was like, holy crap. Like, I can kind of relate a little bit with you, Khosrow, and your plight there. You know? I'm sorry. Any chance I can get to talk about Total War Rome 2, because like I said, I got it back in January, and it's... I've had a lot of fun with it. But yeah, Khosrow's... I guess the objective is... Because I thought the objective was just to kill Rome. That's always kind of how it was framed. Like, this was Rome. If Heraclius didn't win, Rome would be dead forever, though. Now that kind of reframes it. Or maybe he'll change his mind later in the video and be like, you know what, maybe I can kill Rome. I guess we'll see, but either way, this still is kind of like a big thing. And you have to, like, think about Heraclius's situation. There came a point where he only had one army left. Like, the Romans were reduced to one army. So this really was, like, if they suffered a decisive defeat and their army was crushed, that would kind of have been it. So he had to pull this all off without, I guess, the hope of rebuilding his army or getting another one or even having another one to fall back on, which makes what he does incredibly amazing, you get me? Honestly, what a great guy. What a great guy Heraclius was.
Stakes. Heraclius would have to lead the army himself, something no emperor had done for 2 centuries.
Dang.
A trust that the government could manage without his presence. And lastly, the Byzantines would have to make peace in the Balkans, even if it meant paying a large tribute to the Avars and accepting the loss of extensive territory to the Slavs. And with those things done, Heraclius and his army could finally set out on campaign. In spring 622, Heraclius left Constantinople and rendezvoused with his army in central Anatolia, which had spent the past several years training and making up for previous losses. The emperor probably had 15 to 20,000 soldiers under his command, while the Persians likely had 100,000 split across Syria, historical Armenia, and in garrisons.
Dang.
Heraclius's arrival coincided with another Persian invasion from Armenia. Similar to what they had done in the past, Persian vanguards penetrated deep into Anatolia to observe and distract Byzantine defenders, while the main body began sieging down cities in the rear, this time in the eastern Black Sea coast. Heraclius refused to be distracted by either effort. Instead, he rushed east into Armenia, beelining towards Persian territories in eastern Iran and Azerbaijan. Now, instead of forcing Heraclius to react to them, the Persians were forced to react to Heraclius.
He seized the initiative. And yeah, as we see in many times in these videos, my friends, that whoever seizes the initiative and dictates the war usually does better. Like, that's kind of the whole thing, though. Seizing that initiative is crucial in war. You don't want to be the reactor. You want to be the one making the other person react. But the point is, and Heraclius understood that, because look, this move was a good one. At least in terms of seizing the initiative.
Pulling out of Anatolia to chase the emperor and hopefully trap him in the Armenian valleys. In the process, the Byzantine army feigned a retreat in true nomadic fashion, luring the Persians out in pursuit before wheeling around to defeat them.
Dang. The feigned retreat. We saw that so much throughout the Crusader series. You know, just like it's really cool to see how the Romans just straight up took the nomadic way of fighting at times. That's such a unique thing.
With this victory, the arduous Byzantine effort to raise, maintain, and train Heraclius's army was at least partially vindicated. And so, with winter coming on, the emperor decided to call it a day and withdraw back to Anatolia, ending his first campaign. There was also an urgent reason for Heraclius to return. The Avars had broken the peace in the Balkans, which had to be restored before any further offensive against Persia could begin. Despite nearly being kidnapped by the Avars, and despite having to pay even more tribute, Heraclius achieved this by spring 624, at which point he returned to the army in central Anatolia. Heraclius's second campaign had two overarching goals. First, the Byzantines had earlier sent an embassy to the Turks, proposing a joint attack on Persia. The Turks were likely going to agree, and Azerbaijan was likely going to be the target. So the Byzantines needed to go there for better communication, or even a rendezvous. Second, Heraclius had obtained intelligence indicating that Khosrow II himself was at the palace temple complex of Adur-Gushnasp in western Iran, personally supervising the training of a new army. This might have been for a new invasion of Anatolia, or perhaps defensive preparations against the impending Byzantine-Turk alliance. Either way, Khosrow had placed himself within range of the Byzantine army, and a successful capture or humiliation of the Persian king might well end the war in a single stroke. March 624 came, and Heraclius again sped into Armenia, bypassing rather than sieging local and Persian defenses. By June, he had crossed the region and was entering western Iran. Khosrow was taken entirely by surprise.
Dang.
All he could do was muster a hasty defense out of his second-rate troops, and when that was defeated, flee south to Mesopotamia. Heraclius desecrated and destroyed Adur-Gushnasp, an act which not only was revenge for the Persian capture of Jerusalem, but also one designed to maximally discredit Khosrow, especially amongst the nobility of western and northern Iran, who had driven previous revolts against the king.
Wow.
I want to invite you to...
Winter was now setting in, and it was time to execute the other half of Heraclius' strategy, which was to head back north, raiding and pillaging all the while, until the army reached Azerbaijan, where they would winter, replenish losses by recruiting from the regional population, and hopefully meet up with the Turks by spring. Instead, what spring 625 brought was news of 3 Persian armies converging on Azerbaijan, ordered by an enraged Khosrow to destroy Heraclius once and for all. To the south...
My goodness. Yeah, like, definitely things were going a bit too well there, and then just, oh my gosh, that's bad. like almost surrounded. He could potentially be surrounded, which is an awful situation to be in, especially in enemy territory. And granted, he's conquered a bit, but like, you know what I mean? Like, still kind of like not in the most. It doesn't seem like a very favorable position.
A newly raised force was moving north from western Iran. To the northeast, another force under the conquering general Shahbaraz blocked the route to the Black Sea. And to the west, another force was moving across Armenia to deal the killing blow. Heraclius's army basically mutinied at the news, with some recent recruits deserting, while the rest demanded the emperor head directly back to Anatolia. That idea ended quickly once the army realized that Shahbaraz's force was in the way, and Heraclius quickly regained his freedom to command.
Wow.
Moving away from Anatolia, the emperor quickly dispersed the inexperienced southern army and re-entered western Iran, prompting Shahbaraz in the northeast to pursue for fear of letting the Byzantines pillage the region again. In his haste, the general let himself be drawn into open battle with the Byzantine army, which resulted in another defeat.
Holy
after
crap.
which Heraclius engaged the western army and routed it as well.
Dude, that's amazing. How can you not be impressed by this dude? Dude got put in a bad situation, 3 armies converging on his position, proceeds to take them out. That's amazing, bro. Heraclius, just on the battlefield, bro. At this time, he locked in and was like, let me just pull out brilliance every time, bro. Amazing. Just amazing.
With Persian defenses in disarray, the Byzantines...
And again, while in enemy territory too, like he's not in the safety of Anatolia, that's still firmly in the Roman grasp. He's still like, you know, not in the most favorable of positions. So that's also what makes it amazing. You know, I was playing like the Seleucid Empire and Total War Rome 2, and I ended up getting into war with Rome. Fortunately, Rome is I had war with like a lot of other people, so it's not like a 1v1. So I had the benefit. So I had to like travel from my base in Syria and cross into, you know, Greece, and then cross again into Italy, where the Romans were mainly stationed. And again, like, I only had Syria and bits of Anatolia, so I kind of left my power base and had to travel by land, because by sea, the Romans were too dominant. I could not touch them. Like, I did not have a navy powerful enough for that, so I went a full land route far away from my home base, and took the war to Italy, and... oh boy, like, I tried besieging Rome, but ended up getting jumped by, like, 2 armies, and though I won, I lost a lot of dudes, and then I realized your army can't sustain itself too long in enemy territory without a base, and so my campaign ended with me winning 1 giant battle against, like I had, like, what, 900 troops? The Romans in total had like 2,000. Like I won, but it was not like a, how do you say, clean victory. It was definitely one of those, oh man, I cannot fight. Like, the Roman AI is the most aggressive and most in terms of like numerical superiority, better than all the other AIs in the game. So I was like, I need to get out, and so I booked it back to Syria, back to my home base. Back to territory where I could actually rule. It was wild. So I get all this to say, like, reminds me when I was in enemy territory, though I did not handle it as beautifully as Heraclius. I won 1 battle and then got the heck out.
Were once again free to devastate western Iran before returning to Azerbaijan and then withdrawing to Armenia for the winter. The reformed Persian army under Shahbaraz followed at a respectful distance, but that didn't stop Heraclius from inflicting one last defeat on it before the campaign ended.
Dang.
Over the winter, Heraclius finally received the news he had waited so long for. The Turks were going to invade Persia next year. But two can play at this game of nomadic chess, and whatever relief came from this was soon overshadowed by the news that the Avars had again ended their peace with the Byzantines.
Dude, the Avars, bro, they were acting up. Yeah, that's another thing. Like, making peace. Two-front wars are never great. Like, they're in an awful position. Like, I like, when I'm playing, like, War Total Rome 2, I often just spend so much money, because I've been in this exact same position before. Like, I'm, like, as playing as the Seleucids, I'm trying to conquer the East, but having to worry about the West at the same time at the various enemies, and there were times where Armenia declared war on me, so I had to pay Armenia so much money just to leave me alone so I can reconquer and focus my war against Bactria in the Far East. So, like, I get it, like, it sucks, and you don't want to allocate wealth and resources to building many other armies and stuff, so just, I resort to a lot of bribery. Like, after a while, when I have enough money, I'm just like, I'll pay you to just leave me alone, and usually a lot of the AI just agrees if you pay them a lot. But there are times I spend so much money just getting people off my back. And, like, again, Armenia is so unstable. They're just always on the verge of declaring war against me or one of my satrapies, and I have to keep every, like, 5 turns, I have to pay them again to, like, leave my satrapy and me alone. So, yeah. It's annoying.
Probably due to Persian efforts, and were amassing their largest force yet to assault Constantinople. Whatever plans Heraclius had for 626 had to be shelved to deal with the Avars, if only to prevent the Byzantine capital falling into panic and political chaos. As spring 626 dawned, Heraclius made for central Anatolia, but not through the direct eastern route. Instead, he went southeast through northern Syria, likely to observe and disrupt any Persian attempts to militarily support the Avars. Shahrbaraz once again gave chase, but was ultimately repelled by Heraclius. Now back in friendly territory, the emperor had a choice to make. He could go back to Constantinople, like in 623, or he could stay with the army to confront any Persian advance. Heraclius decided to stay, only sending a small contingent back to support his capital. This reflected his confidence in the upcoming siege. While the Avars were well versed in city warfare, Constantinople's size and defenses were on a completely different.
Yeah, that's like another level, bro. Like, taking Constantinople, easier said than done. So that's a really smart move on his part. Like, why he's really needed against the main threat at the moment. Not to discredit the Avars and them being formidable, but I'd say Persia's probably the bigger fish to fry at the moment for Heraclius. So yeah, and plus, yeah, I don't think they're gonna take Constantinople, so I think he can just let the defense handle itself while he deals more with Persia. I think it's a solid move, but I don't know.
Different level, and even though the Avar army was unprecedented, their rudimentary logistics meant that they only had a brief window to capture the capital before their own supplies ran out. Moreover, as the Persians still had not built a fleet to challenge Byzantine control of the eastern Mediterranean, there was no way their armies could cross into Europe to help the Avar assault. In other words, the emperor's leadership and inspirational presence would be much more impactful in battle against the Persians than it was in resisting the Avar siege.
Dang.
Events validated Heraclius's decision. The Avars arrived outside Constantinople in late July, but after a week of hard fighting, they had to retreat due to a lack of supplies. A Persian force under Shahrbaraz indeed appeared on the coast opposite the Avars, but they were of little significance as the Byzantine fleet prevented any attempt by the two armies to link up, and eventually the Persians too withdrew back to Syria. Meanwhile, Heraclius's army repelled a Persian attempt to invade western Anatolia. and the Turks erupted into Azerbaijan and western Iran, devastating those territories for the third time in 3 years. 626 is sometimes seen as the climax of the Byzantine-Persian War and a near-death experience for the Byzantines. In reality, it seems more like a desperate gamble by Khosrow to keep Heraclius away from Persia for a few years, perhaps even force some sort of panicked coup against him. The king failed on these 2 counts, and now faced not just formidable foes across multiple fronts, but also the increasing anger of war-weary nobles who were sick of the annual ravaging of their estates and the punishments hurled at them for failing to defeat Heraclius. General Shahrbaraz, in particular, would keep his army curiously inactive in Syria for the rest of the war, refusing to act even when his intervention would have saved his king from what Heraclius had planned for the next year. With the Avars defeated, the Persians withdrawing, and the Turks in the war, the time had finally come for Heraclius to force peace upon the Persians. For 627, the Turks and Byzantines would jointly conquer Transcaucasia, breaking through the natural and man-made defenses that shielded the heartlands of Mesopotamia and western Iran from the steppe nomads. Presumably, the 2 allies would then thoroughly devastate the latter until the government at Ctesiphon agreed to peace. The beginning of the campaign went smoothly. The Byzantines took the Black Sea coast, while the Turks again broke into Azerbaijan. Only the vassal fortress of Tiflis kept the 2 allies apart, but remarkably, it held out against their combined efforts for the rest of the campaign season. By September, the Turks had to withdraw back north before the Caucasus passes snowed over, leaving Heraclius with the prospect of a wasted year where the Persians could rest and recover. At this point, either as a bold gamble or with the knowledge that key Persian forces, most notably Shahrbaraz's army in Syria, were neutralized, Heraclius decided to finally go for the jugular. Not long after the Turks, the Byzantine army also began retreating from Tiflis, seemingly ready to head through Armenia and back home. But then Heraclius unexpectedly moved south, entering western Iran and prompting the local Persian army to pursue. By mid-October, the Byzantines had crossed the mountains separating Iran from Mesopotamia, and now the emperor was in the Sasanian heartland, the center of Khosrow II's government and prestige.
Dang.
An urgent Persian attack on the Byzantine army near Nineveh was dispersed in November, using the familiar tactic of feigned retreat. Only
The feigned retreat.
great forces and palace garrisons now stood between Heraclius and Khosrow, and at this point the Persian government fell into a panic. Khosrow fled to Ctesiphon, ordered a purge of disloyal nobles, and began seizing whatever was within his grasp to defend the capital. All the while Heraclius was moving
Again, Heraclius' ability to just seize the initiative and keep his enemies on the back foot is like one of the most impressive things so far. You could see why. Just the way that he's able to flawlessly defeat army after army and just keep Khosrow, like, keeps foiling him. It really is amazing.
south, pillaging the noble estates, destroying the royal palaces, and publicly threatening to do it all over again next year, with the Turks alongside him. That said, the irrigated terrain of Mesopotamia was not ideal for Byzantine cavalry. Ctesiphon, even in its current state, was a bit too formidable for Heraclius' liking. So in January 628, the Byzantines turned and made the long trek back north. This was of no help to Khosrow. A group of nobles would overthrow and execute him the next month, beginning a period of political chaos that would see 11 kings crowned over the next 6 years.
Holy crap.
Taking advantage of Persia's instability, Heraclius would reverse all of Khosrow's conquests by 630, restoring Syria and Egypt to the
You know what the rise of Islam reminds me of? Like, I grew up with this anime called Dragon Ball Z, and there's like this fight between these characters. It was Piccolo and Android, I think it was 17. And there's this point where they fight each other and they're both super exhausted. They're like, like they're both on their last legs, barely holding out. And then like Cell shows up, completely fresh, like ready to just pick off these two weakened forces. That's legit what it reminds me of this situation.
Yes, you're trying to make me think that you're stronger, when in fact you're the one who's actually getting worn down.
Delightful. What a momentous occasion. A day for the history books, to be sure. The completion of my being will mark the dawning of a new age.
um I have to say though, like again, Heraclius amazing. What he did was amazing. And again, like I'll say though, the video definitely has framed the perspective, because the way it's always talked about, it always seems like, dude, Rome was about to die. Khosrow was about to deliver the death blow and just take all Rome. Rome was gonna cease to exist. Like that seems the way that a lot of people phrase this. At least the way History March has. It's more like Khosrow practically probably couldn't take everything, or at least assimilate it, you get me? Due to the instability of Persia already. So, I guess, like, it seems more like Rome probably could have still, maybe, worst case scenario, it strikes me now, instead of just the complete destruction of Rome, it's more like Rome would probably still be around to some degree, maybe at a weakened, vassalized state, but, you know, I guess the practicality of not being able to assimilate it, at least that's the vibe I get from this video. It's not like what I usually think, where it just seemed like Rome was literally about to be destroyed forever and it was never gonna rise back up. I mean, maybe that could have happened, who knows, but, who knows, but definitely it does still get the point across that Heraclius single-handedly turned the tide and managed to restore the borders back to kind of what they, at least here in the East, back to what they were pre-war, which, again, on its own is still a beyond amazing comeback. And the fact he did it with one army, because I do believe, yeah, the Romans only had one army left, you know, and the whole situation was in dire straits, so the fact that he managed to just do all that, still amazing. Unfortunately, again, these guys, after 20 years of continual warfare, both had really weakened themselves, which allowed Islam to show up, and, you know, so yeah, it's a bit sad how this ends, knowing that, but still though, amazing comeback, bro. Heraclius, bro, just I really love the guy. He's great. And yeah, I'm gonna end the video right here. I'm glad to have finally watched it, and you know, it's cool to finally get a more historical view on the matter. So yeah, guys, I'll end the video right here, and I'll see you guys tomorrow when we do something else. Bye, everyone.